This is TNT Radio.
Okay, we are beaming at you live this morning from our bunker in the Gold Coast in Australia. But of course, our tentacles reach right across the world here this morning. We will be talking right now to Claire Dyer. Claire is based in the UK and she is an anti-ULEZ campaigner. Now, Claire, up until this year or 6 months ago, no one was being introduced as anti-ULEZ campaigners. People didn't even know what ULEZ was, let alone the fact that there were other people in the world out there campaigning against them. But Sadik Khan, I think, has unleashed a monster within London, at least with these ULEZ zones and these cameras and people being fined. And people are now taking to the streets, performing acts of, how would you say, I don't want to call it, vandalism, I suppose, technically in the eyes of the law, but born from frustration. And I'm not saying, of course, that you advocate any destruction of public property, but you are vehemently opposed to these ULEZ zones and the ULEZ schemes in London. Why is that? Tell the world why it's such a big deal. Why don't you just move on with things and just let things rest, or is it really that bad?
Oh, hi, thanks for having me on, firstly.
You're welcome.
It really is that bad because I think it's about what it's going to be moving on to. So essentially, the ULEZ is a congestion charge, which we already had in London anyway, in the inner cities. And what he did was he expanded it out to the suburban areas of all London boroughs within the M25 motorway. And most of these boroughs are in the countryside. So where I live in the bottom of a valley and I'm surrounded by hills, countryside, farms, horses, lots of lanes. So once it expanded out to here, it was also very obvious as well that our air quality is very, very good as well. It always has been and it still is. It was the fact that we don't have the public transport that London does. So a lot of people, especially obviously globally, when they think of London, they do think of the city of London, lots of traffic, lots of vehicles, the buses, the underground tubes. We don't have that here. We have a bus service, but it's not very good. And we have parts in our area that don't have a bus service. So people have to walk before they can even get to a bus. And our first local town is a good 15 minutes drive away. By bus, it's minimum 30 minutes. So what it's done is for people who don't have compliant cars, and there doesn't seem to be any logic with the cars that are compliant, because you can have a 3 litre, 4 litre petrol engine that's compliant and a 1.2 that isn't compliant. So that's become quite confusing. So it seems to be a bit of a pick and choose, really. So we also in our area, in our borough, we come under the Bromley borough, we have the highest rate of elderly. So what it's done is there's a lot of people around here, and that's just my borough, that now don't have compliant cars. The scrappage scheme wasn't very good because obviously their vehicles devalued. They haven't been able to afford to buy a new vehicle. So therefore, they are essentially locked down. They can't go out. They're getting neighbours to do their shopping. They're just their local shopping for them. It's ruined a lot of people's lives, mentally, in terms of their freedom and also financially. And we know that this is to be extended. There's been a lot of lies. There's been a denial of what is called Project Detroit, basically Project Detroit, which the technology is already up and running for this. I think back in 2019, I might be wrong on that. It's around about that time. That's pay per mile. So that will be coming to everybody, pay per mile, essentially. And what he also wants to do is, so our mayor is one of many mayors globally that is part of C40 cities. So this isn't just an initiative in the UK and London. It is actually a global initiative. And we already have other cities who have their own ULEZ zone or CAS zone, if you like. So Bristol, Birmingham, there's a couple of others as well. The charges aren't consistent either. So I think Bristol's is £9. They also get 6 days to pay. We get 3. So there's no consistency there. So it is looking to be expanded nationwide. Khan has said he wants to expand this nationwide. And there is also a government initiative, essentially, Wales has one as well, to reduce private ownership of vehicles. So it is to be extended and it will affect everybody.
Claire, I think something something else important that you just brought up there, in case I missed this, is this ULEZ fee, for example, that's charged to someone if you venture into a certain area and your vehicle isn't clean enough. You could be charged up to £12.50 every time that you do that. But you also mentioned that you have 3 days to pay that. If you don't pay that, that charge will continue to rack up. And it's not a one-off charge or a monthly charge. It's every time you're caught on camera going into a certain zone. So the cost that would put on the average traveller living in London that doesn't have a compliant car or can't afford to upgrade their compliant car, if you multiply that up over the course of a year, you could be talking about thousands and thousands of pounds year after year after year. That's just not viable for many people that are already struggling to make ends meet in and around London.
Well, even if you pay the daily charge because you already live in the ULEZ zone, so for people who don't have compliant cars that are still having to use them, the second they pull them off their drive, that's a £12.50 charge daily. You charge that, times that by 7, times that monthly, times that a year. It's almost a mortgage, monthly. It's a crazy amount, especially in a cost of living crisis. People just can't afford it. Everything's gone up. Mortgage rates have gone up, gas and electric, everything. So, to have this on top, and where's the logic? Because if this is about net zero and it's about air pollution and NOx, basically, it's okay as long as you pay the £12.50 per day. Yeah. Then it's okay. How does that improve air quality?
Well, that's the thing. And even if it Khan's pushing it from a health point of view, you pay this fee, it doesn't stop. You can still pollute the atmosphere and you can still kill people in his eyes, by respiratory diseases, as long as you're happy to stump up at £12.50 for it. I want to get Natalie's input with a story here that we'll want to bounce off of you, and I want to get Natalie's input in this one as well. Based on what you've just said and how passionately you're speaking about this, people are obviously taking action to sabotage these cameras and not pay them. But Sadik Khan allegedly has now employed masked thugs to protect his ULEZ cameras and also to enforce these ULEZ zones. Natalie, you and I have been covering this, since it really started, which is going back quite a long time now. It's hard to believe it's got to this point where Khan's actually employing a goon squad to enforce this, people taking action against these cameras. What do you think?
Yeah, when I first saw the story, Claire, I thought it was a joke. I thought there's no way the government can be employing like these people. I saw the photos and they look like thugs. I've seen an interview with you before saying that you're quite petite. I also am at 5'2". I feel I had a couple of those guys coming up to me in the middle of the street. I would be scared. I would be intimidated. But it's like it's the loophole, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it needs to be corrected. They're only the security are only covering the mobile units. So to put definition, obviously we have static cameras and they're all over London. There is a distinction. So those cameras are being vandalised, whether that's they're putting stickers on them to block the view. So the security came out on the mobile van units, and these mobile van units were actually deployed to the 5 boroughs that actively opposed ULEZ and took Khan to court, which they lost obviously last July. So it almost felt like it was a form of punishment, because that's the only areas they are covering, which happens to be Essex, Havering, obviously Bexley, Bromley, but on the boundary. So Biggin Hill, we are on the boundary of the ULEZ. You then got Coulston, which comes under Croydon, Sutton area, and then if you go sort of up to the west, you've got Hillingdon area. So they're where the vans are deployed, and this is the security basically guard those vans. So we're peaceful protesters, if you like. All we do is stand there at that van. I mean, they've been at the end of my road, and we hold a banner that blocks the view of that camera. It's not illegal. Because they're not speed cameras, they're not used by the police, they're essentially private. So we're legally allowed to block them as long as we don't obviously cause any criminal damage, which we don't. So yeah, they stand on the streets. They are masked up. I say masked. There's a difference between wearing a surgical mask and wearing a balaclava with skeletons all over it and dark sunglasses and hoodies. So and if someone like us was just loitering on the street, teenagers, whatever, people would think it was suspicious. People would probably be reporting it to the police, thinking that they're about to commit a robbery. Yet it seems that they're allowed to do this. yet TfL run sites do have a dress code. If you're on the underground or the buses, they have to wear high vis, they have to be easily identifiable. And although they aren't employed directly by TfL, they are TfL representatives, and they will say, we are TfL representatives, and that's how they are representing TfL.
It's a sad state of affairs that now, instead of being identified by a high visibility jacket, it could be a balaclava with a skull imprinted on it. That could be the way to differentiate these guys one from the other. But listen, I just thought we'd end that. That's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek humour here, but unfortunately, that's what's actually happening. Claire, we've got a call time in this one as per now, but I have no doubt in my mind that this topic, this story, isn't going anywhere over the course of 2024. So maybe if you would be kind enough, we could use your services to get updates on this throughout the remainder of the year. And in the meantime, just a huge thanks for taking the time out to come on here this morning onto TNT, Today's News Talk. So thank you very much to Claire Dyer. We've got to take another little break right now. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by Mats Nilsson, beaming in from Sweden. So plenty more still to come before the top of the hour here on TNT. We'll be right back.